Welcome to 1867, a remote mining town in the Colorado Territory. Snow drowns the landscape. The wind is thick with whispers no one dares interpret. And on a morning like any other, a boy is discovered outside the burned remnants of the Carson Lodge. No name, no record, no explanation. The townspeople say he didn't speak, not for days. When he finally did, he only asked one thing: "Am I still real?" This is not a ghost story. It's worse. It's the story of a phenomenon so chilling, so fundamentally unnatural, that even the journals of 19th century physicians refused to print it. They said it would disturb the public imagination. And they were right. The few pages that survived, locked in private collections, whispered among underground circles, hint at something that goes far beyond medicine, psychology, or folklore. This boy, he didn't age. Not for years. Not even a wrinkle or a shift in stature. The miners began calling him the Echo. Because that's what he became. An echo of something deeper, darker, older than any of them could name. But here's the part they tried to bury: the military got involved quietly. No uniforms, no names. Just men in long coats and cold eyes. They took the boy, closed the town, and every man who spoke of it afterward died within 6 months. Not mysteriously, systematically. Why? Because the boy is a breach in the veil. A biological impossibility. A psychic echo of forces that manipulate timelines, memory, and consciousness. You think that's science fiction? It's not. This is documented history, pulled from letters, ledgers, and files that were never meant to be opened. Files that reference Project Kinloch. Files that mention biological anomalies of prehuman design. Tonight, I'm going to show you the forbidden layers behind this mystery. Not for entertainment, but for transformation. Because if you have the stomach to go deep enough, this isn't just the story of one boy, it's the story of what they've done to all of us. Keep watching. But understand, what you learn here will not leave you the same. Let's descend. In 1947, a classified document surfaced during an internal audit of decommissioned military assets. Handwritten across the top were 2 words: Kinloch Echo. Beneath it, Subject 4C recovered in Colorado, 1867. Estimated origin: pre-incarnation anomaly. The language wasn't medical, it was ritualistic. This wasn't about treating a child, it was about containing a breach. You see, the boy wasn't alone. He was found surrounded by sigils, symbols burned into the snow, patterns older than the town itself, geometric spirals, interlocking triangles, runes no settler could have drawn. Locals claimed they heard hymns in the night, soft, monotone chanting in a language that had no mouth to speak it, and when they tried to document it, ink would not dry on the page. This is where the truth begins to fracture. The physicians assigned to him weren't random. They were affiliated with the American Phrenological Society, a front group, historically proven to have collaborated with early U.S. psychological warfare experiments. Their journals spoke of the boy's unsettling gaze and how he could mimic emotions without possessing them. They wrote of mirroring phenomena, how he would unconsciously reflect the deepest, most repressed memories of those around him. Men would walk into the room and emerge sobbing or violently disturbed. He didn't speak much, but when he did, it was in the exact voice of their dead mothers, their lost brothers, their childhood selves. What you need to understand is this: the boy was a cipher, a blank slate, but something ancient, had written its code upon him. And here's where it gets darker. An unnamed field agent wrote in the margin of one report: Subject does not cast a reflection. Subject responds to infrared frequencies not yet invented. Subject dreams, but of events that haven't occurred yet. This was not a boy. This was a rupture, an infiltration, a piece of the unseen stitched into flesh. And the people in charge knew it. They didn't try to heal him. They tried to copy him. And what came next rewrote everything we thought we knew about mind control, memory manipulation, and the architecture of human consciousness. We're not dealing with myth. We're dealing with a prototype. In late 1868, a man named Dr. Elias Kern, formerly of the Smithsonian's Ethnographic Division, was brought to the site under heavy escort. He was not a physician. He was an occult archaeologist masquerading as an academic, and what he found beneath the Carson Lodge changed everything. Buried 6 feet under the foundation, Kern uncovered a circular stone slab etched in what he identified as proto-pictoglyphs. Not Native American, not Latin, something prehuman. A language built not from sound but from intention. Each symbol corresponded to emotion, memory, and something he only referred to as the tether. The slab wasn't just a marker. It was an anchor, a psychic mooring post for something not of this realm. And the boy? He wasn't the first. According to Kern's decoded findings, every few centuries the tether reactivates, and a host is selected. Someone young, empty, vulnerable to imprinting by forces beyond comprehension. The boy was a vessel, a prototype built to test humanity's psychological defenses. Kern's final report is chilling. The subject does not become what you fear. He reveals that the fear was never yours to begin with. He is not a mirror, he is a key. Now pause and let that sink in. He is a key. And keys open doors. What doors exactly? Psychological ones? Temporal ones? The kind sealed by rituals long before written history began. Let me tell you what's been quietly suppressed. In the weeks following Kern's discovery, every person who came into direct contact with the slab reported distortions of time. One claimed to relive his own birth from the perspective of the midwife. Another walked into a room and came out with knowledge of languages he never studied. A third carved his own face off with a mining chisel, screaming, "Hay's waking up inside me," before dying of blood loss. The government didn't cover this up to protect the public. They covered it because they were using it. They saw the slab not as a threat, but as a gateway to control. You think MK Ultra started in the 1950s? No, that was just the rollout. The boy in Colorado was the beta test, and what he unlocked they never managed to close again. The official record says the boy was relocated in early 1869 to a federal asylum near Baltimore. That record is a lie. What actually happened is far more disturbing and much more dangerous. A hidden directive, signed by what would later become known as the Black Meridian, ordered his transport to Facility IX, a subterranean complex buried beneath an abandoned silver mine near Medicine Bow, Wyoming. This facility didn't officially exist. It wasn't on any map, but internal correspondence between early Bureau of Psychological Strategy officials shows repeated references to the Echo Room. Let me explain what that was. The Echo Room was a sealed chamber designed with no corners, only soft, concave walls made from sound-absorbent composite mined from meteorite ore. There were no windows, no doors once sealed. Inside, the boy was left alone for 22 days. No food, no water, no stimulation, just the void. On day 23, something answered back. Technicians monitoring the chamber's acoustic field registered ultra-low-frequency pulses, 4 Hz, below the human threshold of hearing. These pulses were structured, not random. When converted to audio range and played back at 400x speed, they formed rhythmic patterns and then words. The first message, "I am not him, I am what speaks through him." They didn't believe it at first. Thought it was some kind of hallucination. Until the boy began to change. Not in appearance, but in presence. Guards who monitored him started dreaming the same symbols etched on the stone slab. One shot himself in the eye. Another disappeared entirely. No trace. The last was found writing equations in his own feces that matched classified quantum models not publicly released until 2011. This is what you're not being told, D. The human mind is not just a processor. It is a receiver. And certain frequencies, when amplified through trauma, isolation, or ritual, can act like tuning forks for other intelligences. The boy wasn't insane. He was tuned. And something else was using him to broadcast a cross-dimensional bandwidth. They called it K's crawling, a process where identity is slowly overwritten, frame by frame, until the host is no longer aware they've changed. Now take a deep breath. Because here's the part that should terrify you. Phase crawling didn't end with the boy. It became the blueprint for what was later refined, repackaged, and deployed at mass scale. You've seen it before, felt it, but you didn't know what to call it. Until now. You've felt it, haven't you? That eerie sense that something is off, not outside you, but within. A subtle warping of memory, thought, even identity itself. You write a sentence and forget what it meant. You walk into a room and can't remember why. These aren't accidents, they're echoes. The boy wasn't just a singular event. He was the model, and what they learned from him in Facility IX became the foundation of a far-reaching psychological architecture designed to fracture the human mind. Not with violence, but with confusion. A method called Semantic Dissolution. Here's how it works if you change the meanings of words. If you alter symbols people rely on to navigate reality. If you flood their senses with contradiction, irony, absurdity, and synthetic pleasure, eventually the internal compass breaks. And once a man cannot trust his own thoughts, he will seek authority to do it for him. That's when control begins. The boy in his induced echo state was capable of mirroring any emotion, but he could also invert it. One nurse recalled seeing him smile while weeping. Another said he recited a funeral prayer with the glee of a child reciting a rhyme. This isn't psychosis, it's programming. A deliberate misalignment of meaning and emotional response, the prototype for what would become cultural schizophrenia. Fast forward to today. What is irony, sarcasm, satire, meme culture? If not a modern echo room, Endless loops of contradicting emotion, joy bleeding into despair, pleasure wrapping around fear. You're not being entertained, you're being conditioned. Because when everything is a joke, nothing is sacred. And when nothing is sacred, nothing is real. And that's the final lock. Once reality becomes liquid, the ones who engineered the storm can sell you the lifeboat, and you'll thank them for the leash. Understand this, the mind of that boy was not destroyed, it was hollowed, gutted of organic identity and refilled with a broadcast, a message, a weapon. And the worst part, you're already carrying a version of it. Every algorithm, every ad, every dopamine-triggering distraction is calibrated to echo what they discovered in 1867. You're not being informed, you're being echoed. There's a reason why you feel disconnected in crowds. Why your memories feel like they've been tampered with. Why silence feels heavier now than it did 10 years ago. You are not broken. You are interfered with. Let's go back to Facility X. Months after the Echo Room experiments, a pattern emerged. The boy's vitals remained static. No pulse, no body heat, yet he never decomposed. Surveillance footage, what little exists, shows a child completely motionless for hours, then suddenly shifting positions between frames, without any visible movement in real time. One technician went mad reviewing the tapes, insisting the boy was being rewritten frame by frame, like film spliced by an invisible hand. His last journal entry? He is not the anomaly. We are. That's when they realized this wasn't possession. It was something far worse, substitution. The boy wasn't being controlled. He was being replaced, one neural command at a time, not instantly but slowly, precisely, surgically. A process designed to be unnoticed. And that's when the Black Meridian accelerated their efforts. They saw the potential, not as a curiosity, not as a threat, but as a system. If one boy could be overwritten by a broadcast, then millions could. With the right signals, with the right media, with the right triggers. This was the moment the modern mind control apparatus was born, not out of war, but study. Not to kill the body, but to corrupt the compass. Let me ask you, when was the last time you had a thought you knew was truly your own, not echoed from a feed, not recycled from culture, not reactionary, not programmed? Can you even tell anymore? You are a host. They don't need to burn your books or steal your guns. They just need to tune you slightly again and again, until you forget what silence ever felt like. And what the boy revealed was simple. Silence isn't empty. It's the last safe place. Before we go deeper, comment below. I remember the silence. Now write it again. I remember the silence. Lock it in. Make it yours. This is how the transformation begins. They echo. You remember, Facility X was eventually shut down, but not destroyed. They didn't bury it. They sealed it. You seal things that are still alive. In 1904, a rail worker named Thomas Ryle stumbled upon an unlisted shaft entrance while surveying terrain for an expansion route. He followed it 3 levels down, until he found a door made not of wood nor steel, but black stone. Smooth, seamless, cold to the touch. Etched into its surface were the same glyphs found beneath the Carson Lodge nearly 4 decades earlier. He left a single note in his logbook before he vanished. It hummed when I touched it. And then I saw my own future, but it wasn't mine. He was never seen again. The site was quietly acquired by the War Department 6 months later under Executive Order 431C. It now operates under the name Kinloch Subterranean Research Division. No website. No public records. No noise. But I want you to see the pattern now. The boy was not the subject. We were. He was the test run, the original blueprint, and what followed was a century of scaling the same model outward. Mass trauma as psychic destabilization. Media saturation as reality confusion. Pharmaceutical sedation as emotional flattening. Digital stimulation as thought replacement. Each wave more subtle, more effective. Until people forgot there was even a before. Let me put it plainly, we are all living in an extended version of the Echo Room. A culture designed to disorient and fragment, where nothing stays still long enough to remember who you really are. And every day they feed the machine. More noise, more distraction, more redefinition, until the voices inside your head aren't yours anymore. The boy wasn't a miracle. He wasn't a myth. He was a leak. Proof of something older, colder, and vastly more intelligent than the institutions that tried to contain him. You feel it already, don't you? That sense that you were meant for more, but something clipped your wings before you even learned to fly. That's not paranoia. That's remembrance. It's what they've spent generations trying to erase. But the seal is weakening, and what they buried in Colorado wants out. It always starts with a fracture, a splinter in the narrative, a whisper in the back of the mind that says, something's wrong, and it's been wrong for a very long time. That's not madness. That's memory. In 1933, during the construction of a hydroelectric facility near the original Carson Lodge site, engineers unearthed something that had no business being there, a chamber buried in basalt, 15 feet wide, perfectly symmetrical, with walls that absorbed all sound. Inside were 7 petrified figures, children, arranged in a circle, eyes open, mouths agape in silent screams. The official report listed it as mineral oddity. But the private photographs, archived and later leaked, showed something else entirely. The pupils of the figures weren't made of stone. They were made of obsidian, perfectly polished, reflective, almost watching. At the center of the circle, a carving, one phrase etched in a language older than Latin, Aramaic, or Sumerian. Translated by comparative linguists in secret decades later, it read, "A we er not teach fairs teo fell." And just like that, the myth cracked open. You see, the boy wasn't the beginning. He was the latest in a pattern, a recurring breach point in the timeline. Civilizations have always had their echoes. They're changelings, they're anomalies. Children born without souls or possessed of voices not their own. Ancient texts speak of them, the silent suns, the mouths without tongues, the hollow skins. But the truth was always hidden in folklore, drowned in fire and fear. Until 1867, until someone got curious instead of cautious, until someone said, what if we could harness it instead of fearing it? That moment, that decision, was the pivot point. Because from then on, it wasn't about containment. It was about weaponization. They took the breach and made it a blueprint. They took the echo and turned it into a frequency. They learned how to bottle the void and feed it to us. Look around you now. Do you really think this world is evolving? Or is it just degrading beautifully? Nothing natural would build a system this hollow, this loud, this confused. Only something that feeds on disorientation would. The boy didn't vanish. He multiplied. And every screen, every signal, every narrative you can't quite untangle, that's him. Or rather, what spoke through him. Let me pull the veil back even further. You've heard of possession, right? A quaint term useful in horror films and exorcist lore. But that's not what's happening here. What we're dealing with is resonance colonization. The systematic replacement of selfhood through persistent frequency exposure. The boy was never possessed, in the religious sense. He was retuned. A broadcast tower for something ancient enough to remember when language itself was a weapon. Something that doesn't need your consent, only your attention. This is why every psychological control system, since the late 19th century, has focused not on force, but on focus. They don't need to cage you. They just need to control what you look at, what you hear, what you repeat, echo, repeat, resonate. That's why modern media isn't about information. It's about entrainment, flashing lights, rising tones, endless scrolls. Your brain isn't reacting anymore, it's sensing. And the seed of that process, the proof of concept, was discovered in the blank, unblinking stare of a boy found in the Colorado snow in 1867. Now lean in 1978, an ex-intelligence asset leaked a memo detailing Project Nyx, a classified follow-up to MK Ultra. Its goal was to train AI to detect and replicate the non-linear linguistic patterns observed in subjects who had direct contact with Facility IX materials. Why? Because the machines couldn't understand it, not fully. Something in that language, those sigils, those symbols, disrupted algorithmic logic chains. In short, it short-circuited control systems, which meant it was older than logic, older than programming, older than thought itself. That's when the panic started behind closed doors. The very technology we were building to control humanity could be corrupted by what the boy carried. So what did they do? They didn't destroy it. They buried it inside the technology. They made it a feature. Now the frequency is everywhere. In your headphones, in your movies, in your thoughts. Because once you hear the echo, truly hear it, it doesn't stop. The boy wasn't speaking nonsense. He was transmitting the future. There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes the world isn't just broken, it was built that way. We've been taught to believe in randomness, in coincidence, in the sweet lie of chaos with no author. But step back. Look again. The patterns are too precise, the decay too consistent, the confusion too perfectly engineered. This is where the boy leads us, not to ghosts or monsters, but to the machine behind the mirror. You see, what they found in that child wasn't just a phenomenon. It was a blueprint for invisible influence. The boy taught them how to rewrite identity without force, how to make a man surrender to a frequency that feels like his own thought. By 1982, that technology had a name, Resonant Induction Control Architecture, or RIKE. On paper, it was a neurological interface experiment. In practice, it was the digitized evolution of what they discovered in 1867, converting emotion into input and input into override. The goal was no longer to program the mind, but to replace the soul's architecture. You've felt this. When you're doom scrolling at 2 a.m., and you forget what you were even looking for. When you say something you don't believe, because the algorithm rewarded it. When your rage feels artificial, but you speak it anyway. That's Reiksha, a weaponized echo. Not screaming at you, but humming underneath you. And here's the darkest truth they never wanted written. The boy never died. Because he was never fully alive in the first place. Not in the way you and I understand it. He was a carrier. A vessel. And after Facility X, they didn't destroy the prototype. They dispersed symbols. Into media. Into frequencies. Fragments of him were copied into psychological protocols. Spliced into curriculum culture code. The world you live in now is the echo of that original event. The boy was the first rupture. The first infected node in a global experiment that's now entering its final phase. And if you feel hollow, uncertain, disconnected, that's not your failure. It's the signal working exactly as designed. But once you hear this frequency for what it is, you can begin to fight it. The question is, are you ready to break the echo? Breaking the echo isn't about rebellion. It's about remembrance. Because before the programming, before the confusion, before the frequencies hijacked your perception, you were whole. You were sovereign. And that's what they fear most. Not violence, not resistance, but clarity. Because a clear mind cannot be programmed. A silent mind cannot be invaded. And a sovereign mind? That's contagion to their control. Here's what they don't want you to know. The experiment wasn't just on the boy. It's been on every generation since. From 1867 forward, every major technological leap has coincided with a new layer of psychological distortion. The phonograph, the radio, the television, the smartphone, each one was sold as progress. Each one tuned you further away from stillness. And every layer carried an imprint of that original signal, the boy's signal. The echo has scaled. Think about it. Why is attention the most valuable commodity on Earth? Why is distraction infinite but silence rare? Why are you constantly nudged, stimulated, provoked? Because silence is the only state they cannot invade. And when you access it even for a moment, you can hear them. And worse, they know you can speak back. There are reports, deep black file accounts, of men who spent prolonged time in sensory isolation, emerging with knowledge they could not explain. They sketched symbols they'd never seen, wrote equations that defied known physics, spoke dead languages fluently. Their only common trait, they had all come into contact, direct or indirect, with artifacts related to the boy. That's when the agencies changed tactics. No more direct containment. They realized it was too late. So instead, they flooded the world with noise, to drown the signal, to bury the echo under memes, likes, rage, porn, fake purpose, fake enemies, fake everything. So you'd never find the still point again. The point where he speaks. The point where you remember who you are. The boy was the breach. But the echo is now inside you. And if you can hear me now, it means you've already started to wake up. Waking up isn't euphoric, it's violent, because the moment you step outside the echo, everything familiar turns hostile. Your comforts, your impulses, your beliefs, all reveal themselves not as truths, but as installations. Pieces of a map drawn by something that doesn't want you to leave. But once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Every ritual of modern life, your daily scroll, your constant stimulation, your addiction to outrage, is a leash. A quiet contract with the machine that began in 1867, when a hollow boy stared into the snow and breathed without life. And now we reach the part no one wants to say out loud. This system feeds on echoes. It needs repetition. It needs you to mimic what you hate. It needs you to argue endlessly in loops. It needs your focus. Because your focus is currency in this war. But here's the glitch in the machine: awareness corrupts the signal. When a man becomes aware of the loop, he stops playing, he silences the narrative, and he starts to remember what silence sounded like before they rewrote it. This is what they tried to stop. In 1994, a hidden file emerged during a breach at a now dissolved intelligence node in Laramie, Wyoming. The file was titled Reverberation Pathways. Inside, an outline for what they called signal immunization, a series of meditative protocols designed to disconnect a subject from externally induced echo cycles. The file concluded with a warning. Subjects who reach complete silence report autonomous thought for the first time. They begin rejecting all programmed identity. Subject no longer responds to narrative control. Containment unlikely. That's the power they fear. Not guns, not riots, stillness. A man who doesn't flinch, who doesn't echo, who doesn't react. Because he knows what is his and what was installed. You want to break the system. Break the echo. Withdraw the fuel. Reclaim your signal. Because the boy was not their creation. He was their warning, and that warning has been growing inside of you, unnoticed, until now. There's a moment just before the echo dies, where everything goes quiet. Not peaceful, not serene, but tense. Like the breath held before a scream. That's where we are now. And in that silence, if you've made it this far, you start to hear things differently. Not with your ears, with your core. You start to notice that your desires aren't yours, that your fears were given to you, that your impulses have been cultivated like crops. This is the final phase of the experiment. Not control, not obedience, but self-deletion. They want you to press the mute button on yourself, to ridicule your intuition, to sabotage your vision, to bury your primal knowing beneath layers of ironic detachment and synthetic stimulation. This is psychological euthanasia at scale. And it began with a boy they called Echo. The documents, those that remain, describe the last phase of his life not as medical, but as ritualistic. The scientists stopped taking vitals. They began taking measurements of silence. How long he could go without blinking. How long he could hold his breath. How still his thoughts became when exposed to low-frequency tones between 3.2 and 3.6 Hz. And then, one day, he spoke. One final sentence. No accent, no emotion. Just a flat frequency that registered on equipment before he even opened his mouth. He who forgets his name becomes the perfect host. Then silence. No heartbeat. No brain activity. No decline. Just nothing. The boy didn't die. He disappeared. Because when you erase identity down to the bone, when you silence the inner voice long enough, when you replace meaning with signal, there is nothing left to anchor you here. And that is the final truth. They don't need to kill you. They only need to make you forget who you are. Because then, you'll echo whatever they insert next. And you won't even notice the change. But if you're still here, if this message is still reaching the real you, then something inside resisted. It remembered. It refused. It stayed awake. And now you know what must be done. This is the last descent. If you've made it here, you've already crossed a threshold most men never even knew existed. Not just through history, but into the hidden architecture beneath it. You've seen the pattern, the experiment, the echo. And now comes the most dangerous truth of all: you were never the target. You were the prize. They didn't build this machine to destroy you. They built it to harvest you, your will, your attention, your essence. The boy in 1867 wasn't an aberration. He was a mirror, a reflection of what we become when our soul is stripped down to code. He was the future they envisioned: docile, responsive, programmable. But he failed in one critical way. He remembered that final sentence. He who forgets his name becomes the perfect host. Was not a surrender. It was a warning. Because forgetting your name doesn't just mean losing memory. It means surrendering your origin, your sovereignty, your signal. And now, look around. Look inside. How many of your thoughts are truly yours? How many of your fears were handed to you wrapped in branding? How many times have you ignored the pull of something ancient, something real, because the echo screamed louder? You are not here by chance. You are not weak, or broken, or lost. You are resonant. And resonance, true resonance, cannot be faked. It cannot be programmed. It cannot be bought. It must be remembered. So what now? Now you choose. Do you return to the noise, let the echo fold you back into its frequency? Or do you step into silence and begin the process of retrieval? Retrieve your name. Retrieve your power. Retrieve your signal. Because this isn't just about a boy in the snow. This is about every man who's ever stared into the void of modernity and sensed that something was being stolen from him, and dared to chase it down. They fear that man, because that man doesn't echo, he radiates. So if you heard this, truly heard it, then you know the echo ends with you. Now stand in the silence, and let them hear the one sound they cannot program: your awakening.